Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that will give you a skill set that will make you marketable for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Metro Atlanta.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent, also from Atlanta, currently in North Carolina.
And I'm David Williams, and I'm a dad from Chicago, Illinois.
This week in the news, the big college expense you probably didn't know about or save for. Mandatory health insurance, a great article by Bruce Brumberg of Forbes magazine. Mark and Anika will discuss if I am just flat broke. What is the cheapest way to go to college? Our bonus content is going to be part 1 of 3 bonus contents on how COVID is changing college admissions this year. Our interview is the final part of Lisa Rouff talking about careers in mental health counseling. And our college spotlight comes to you from Williamstown, Massachusetts, and it is Williams College.
Friends, I'm in a good mood today because today is my birthday.
My birthday, okay. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Mark, happy birthday to you. Well deserved, my friend.
Hey, it's a good thing you didn't sing because Anika would have just snatched you from Greensboro unless you're better than me.
Happy birthday. No, we won't go there. We're trying to keep the podcast listenership growing. My brother says you have to invoke the black man rule. When you hit 50, you start counting backwards. So happy 43rd birthday, Mark.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. I like to say I'm on the back nine. But, my day starts out, okay, so I get this call at 1:45 in the morning, and It's Karis. Look at your phone, you see Karis. I'm like, Karis, is everything okay? And then she breaks in, happy birthday. She got me good on that one. I'm all worried about everything. And then I got this amazing email from a text from Joy, which just was awesome. And then I talked to my parents, and I was talking to my parents, Dave, and they were like, have you heard any updates? How's Eldon doing? So for those of you who don't know, Eldon is Dave's dad. I call him Uncle Eldon, and my dad and Dave's dad have been friends for like 75 years. It's really cool. And so they're asking me how Eldon's doing, and then they said, that Eldon is 92, and he's like, 8 months older than my dad. And so I got to thinking, so Eldon is 8 months older than my dad, and Dave is 8 months older than me.
That's right.
So, yeah, and so you are the oldest son in your family. Yeah. I'm the oldest son in my family, and so our parents must have been exactly the same age when they had us at 35.
Wow.
So lots of parallels there, but it ends there because I didn't go to Princeton, Harvard, or Northwestern like Smarty Pants over here.
Oh, please stop that.
So that's where the comparisons end.
Well, I was going to make a joke that clearly our parents might have been vacationing at the same hotels.
We better
they
tell
got
them
the
not
honeymoon
to listen.
suite special at some point in time.
We better tell them not to listen to this episode.
That's right.
Okay, friends, I am very excited about an announcement I'm going to make. I've been really wanting to do something for all of our listeners for a while. And I'm all about the win-win, and it's been a good year for me. God's blessed me in a lot of ways. So I thought of an idea that's great for you as our listeners, and it's also great for my daughter, Karis. So my oldest daughter, Karis, graduated Spanish from Davidson, and she has a Spanish tutoring business.
A great Spanish tutoring business.
Thank you. So here's something to do for our listeners. It's my Christmas gift to our listeners. You will get 2 free hours, 1 hour at a time of tutoring with my daughter. And I will pay her. So she gets some money instead of giving her a Christmas gift. I'll just pay her for tutoring you, and you'll get the benefit. And this applies to a student that wants to learn Spanish. It also applies to an adult. You got a mom out there that doesn't know Spanish and you want to learn it, the way the demographics of the country are changing, we're going to be 30 to 40% Spanish speakers in the not too distant future. So I'm happy to extend that to you. All you need to do is shoot an email to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com and say, send me the details about the free 2 hours of Spanish tutoring. And I think you'll really like my daughter. Dave, you've gotten to know my daughter a little bit.
Absolutely. I would love to give full props to Karis right now because my daughter is currently being tutored by Karis in Spanish. And Lauren actually had a lot of training in French. She went and spent a year in France and was in advanced French. So she really wanted to switch over to Spanish. So in this year off, Mark, you made the wonderful suggestion many months ago that she contact Karis to aid her in her tutoring. And she's just had a wonderful time. And she's often said that the instruction that she's getting from Karis is every bit the equal of the instruction that she got in French languages in her first year of college. So it is a wonderful, wonderful course. Karis is a great teacher. My daughter can't speak more highly of her. And I think they've become great friends.
They really have. Thanks for saying that, Dave. Very, very kind of you. I know you wouldn't say it if you didn't mean it. And you prove it because Dave isn't free. He pays.
That's right.
He keeps paying every month. So I guess the proof is in the value there.
I'm still Mr. Cheapster because it's such a great rate. I'm not going to tell her, but what a great bargain. I'll keep paying it.
Yeah, her rates are good. She's, she's young and she's trying to help people and she doesn't have the life expenses. So good for her and good for all our listeners.
Yeah.
Now, listen, this podcast, I just realized, is going live actually on Thanksgiving Day.
Yep.
And so just a warning out there, everybody, be careful because, Canada has a Thanksgiving about a month, about maybe like 6 weeks before ours. I think it's early October. It's sometime in October. Yep. And it led to a huge COVID outbreak. And so everybody, while you're having your turkey, while you're doing the family festivities thing, just be careful. Dave, I know you had plans to have your whole family come out to the Virgin Islands, and they said, I'm not going any Virgin Islands with COVID spreading.
Well, that's exactly right. I'm here now, and the plan was that Free to Learn, we're supposed to fly down on Wednesday, and we were supposed to spend 8 days in the Virgin Islands. Well, two things. Number one, Lauren got a cold. I don't think it's COVID, but in all honesty, when you have a little cough and a sniffles, you can't really board a plane now because you can't honestly sign that waiver. But my wife was looking at these skyrocketing cases and finally said, I love you, honey, but no, we're not boarding a plane. And so I'm going to be here by my lonesome. Now, I can tell you what also happened. I was like, darn, I don't want to spend Thanksgiving all by myself. So I thought of my good friend Jeff Wright in Canada. And I called him up and said, well, Jeff, I'm going to be here at the Margaritaville Hotel in an Airbnb if you want to come on down and do some scuba diving. The day after I called him, Mark, Canada went on a 28-day lockdown. Toronto, Canada.
Oh, my God. Yeah, and when I talked to Mom today, she said it's really bad in Toronto.
It is.
It's really bad. Yeah. Wow. So you will be by your lonesome self. You tried all the angles.
Man, I'm going to have to go out. I thought my wife would come, and knowing her, she would cook and this and that. Now I'm going to have cold turkey sandwiches. So I want all the podcast listeners to feel sorry for me.
Oh man, you're just trying to get some more cookies or some more DoorDash gifts, man. But ever since you went to the Virgin Islands, that dried up. And ever since she stopped working with COVID patients and went to the Virgin Islands, people are like, man, he can send me a gift card and some cookies.
Mary, wherever you are, if you happen to be by St. Thomas, you can always drop me off a turkey with some cookies.
Man, let's talk business. Oh, my goodness. Okay, admissions tip. So this is an interesting one. Two students I work with, one in the Pasadena area and another in suburban Philly. They said, I'd like to bounce an idea off you. My counselor said that it'd be a good idea for me to submit all my applications before I hear back from my early schools. The idea being that if you apply early and you're going to hear maybe mid-December, if you don't get good news, maybe a little bit of a funk, maybe a little dejected. and doesn't put you in the right frame of mind to start doing the rest of your applications. What do you think about that? And I said, I love that so much that will be our admissions tip of the week.
Yep.
For those of you who have submitted early, I think I've got them in. Maybe you've done 3 or 4 of them. Don't stop completing those applications, because if you don't get the news you like, it is a little bit hard. You got Christmas, might not have got the greatest news. You don't have to hit the submit button, okay? But you can have them ready, and if you don't get the news you like, then you can hit submit. So keep working away. Don't take your foot off the gas. You'll get a chance to take a break, just not quite yet. That's my admissions tip.
Good advice.
Admissions vernacular, dependency override.
Dependence. Man, you've been hitting me with some hot stuff. Dependency override. Man, that sounds like something on the space shuttle, and, you're about to flame up and you have to, like, press a button to actually, like, okay, no, let's not go in the weeds.
So you're getting
override.
exposed. You're getting
exposed.
Wait,
I can figure that. Dependency. Okay, so I can say, I can figure this one out. Let's say someone a student is dependent on their parents, but for whatever reason, they figure out a way where they and their parents are divorced financially, so the colleges can override the dependent status of the parents and make them independent or something like that.
You actually got it right, but you're guessing. It's the first time ever. I was about to say you were exposed because you used to listen to every single episode of the podcast until the election got close, and you cut the Anika section in the interview out for some podcasts, from political podcasts, because we've talked about this a lot, and you've been missing it, so I almost exposed you. No,
that's the guy who literally refers me 10 podcasts a day. You gotta listen.
Yeah, including ours.
That's right.
So yeah, dependency override is when, well, first of all, the majority of students coming out of high school are going to be considered a dependent from a financial aid standpoint, meaning that parents are going to have to share their income and assets. Mm-hmm. And the school will take the income and assets of the parents, which, let's face it, that's where the money is. It's not with the kid. They're going to take that into consideration when they figure out how much you can afford to pay. And sometimes people think, well, what if I put my kid in an apartment and they're living on their own? Can't they be independent? Nope, it doesn't work that way. But a dependency override is when a college does, financial aid officers do have the ability to come in and say, you know what? We're going to overrule the fact that it looks like you should be a dependent. We're going to make you independent. And that happens oftentimes when cases where there's abuse involved, to be honest. When there's evidence of child abuse is one of the most common times when you'll see the dependency override occur. It's not the only one, but it's a common one. So good job, man, using your powers of deduction. I was thinking you're usually guesses way out in left field. All right, Dave. We got a media article today, and it's kind of in your realm of doctor health and all that. So let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
This is a very important article, and actually it's an article that I can totally relate to on so many levels. And it's one of these articles that is really a must read on several points. So Mark, I'm going to go give a little overview of the article, and then we're going to discuss its points. Okay, so It is the big college expense you probably didn't even know about or save for: mandatory health insurance by Bruce Brumberg in Forbes. So the summary of the article is that even if your family has health insurance, colleges are increasingly forcing you to pay their own policies that can often exceed $5,000 over and above what you thought the tuition and other expenses were going to be. So the question is, why are they doing it and how to avoid it? And the reason why they're doing it is because even though your kids are 18 or 19 and healthy, things happen. And things happen to young people. When they happen, they can be quite catastrophic. Maybe it's an accident. Maybe it's a new diagnosis of diabetes. But the health costs that occur when young people do get sick, even though it's rare, can often be so astronomical that they can actually dwarf the actual cost of college. And so colleges want to avoid that. And that's why they forced you to. So there's two things that the article says, and then we're going to discuss it. And that is, number one.
And David, I would even say this. I mean, It's not all that rare because, you think of just intramural sports alone, correct. ACLs and all kinds of injuries that can happen. I mean, you know what I mean? Accidents, car accidents, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, it's rare in that the average kid doesn't have it happen. But if you've got a school of 30, 40,000, you know what I mean? And if it happens to even 1%, that's a pretty big number.
It is a big number. I'm going to give you some real life examples during this. But
you probably have some emergency rooms times when people have come in the emergency room off of a college. I'm sure you have seen that.
I really do. So here's the 2 points, and then we're going to jump into the meat of the article. So they say, number one, there is a way to avoid this, and that is that you can get a waiver that proves that your health plan is comparable to what the college has to offer, but you have to do this in July or August before the tuition bills come out. But, and there's a big but, you may not want to do this because in many ways, the college plans can actually be cheaper and much better than the parents. So that's the crux of it, Mark. And how do you want to dive into this article?
Well, that was a great intro. I'll just add some things from real life experience and some stories, and you'll probably have some as well. I mean, the other reason why they sometimes do it, and sometimes you actually can't get a waiver, because sometimes the policy that the parent has does not cover certain states. Like, so you might have a health policy that's comprehensive, in your state or within 500 miles of where you live. I mean, all that fine tape is in there. And when they look at it, it's not going to cover comprehensively what they need covered at their state. And that can be a huge expense when that happens. Now, we've talked about this a few times, but it's been about a couple of years. It was like pre-Dave. There's just like BCAD, there's pre-Dave and post-Dave. So Dave, you started at 105. I remember doing an article with Anika on this way back in our first year. And I remember, when Karis got to Davidson College, they made it very clear, if you don't submit this waiver, and it's not just the waiver involves sending a copy of your insurance for them to evaluate and make sure that your insurance is going to cover what they need covered. If you don't do this by, and it was a date in July, then we automatically are adding $1,500 to your bill. And I said, Karis went to Davidson the year before. Jalen, Anika's son, I said, Anika, please complete this. And I had multiple conversations with financial aid officers. And they said people would be screaming and yelling at them when they would find this. What's this on my bill? Yep. And then they say, we sent you multiple notices that you had to do it. And I mean, that's not the easiest pill to swallow. You just wasted $1,500 that you could have saved because you didn't read your email and you didn't read the fine print. Right. Another thing the article talks about, though, one thing you didn't share is how poor of a job colleges do at making this lucid.
Correct.
They really do. Like, and poor Northwestern, they put Northwestern on blast. They used Northwestern as an example in the article. Yeah. And they showed, here's what they actually say about fees, and here's a breakdown of what's actually required. Yep. And so a lot of people can miss the waiver, even if they do have sufficient health insurance that would constitute getting a waiver approved, just because colleges a lot of times are just not clear in communicating this in terms of how they list it in fees, in terms of how they get the messaging out. So those are a couple of things I wanted to share. Dave, sound like you had a story that you wanted to interject.
Well, yes. And I'll first segue into this because it gives some examples of how much is this insurance. And it had a little chart of the colleges. So, for example, Stanford University is going to charge you an extra $5,208 for the student insurance. Northwestern isn't that much better. They're going to charge over $4,000. Duke's a little cheaper, $3,500, and BU you can get two plans between $2,400 and $3,200. So the first thought is that's such a ripoff, $5,200. But let me tell you, if you're an independent contractor like I am, you may have an Obamacare type insurance, that policy that reads like this. My wife and I currently pay about $1,850 for health insurance. It's comprehensive.
A month, not a year, Dave. That's a month, not a year.
That is per month. That is per month.
Yeah.
But that is with a $7,000 individual deductible and a $14,000 family deductible. So what that essentially means is $1,800. That's $18. So that's over $20,000 of insurance a year, plus an additional $14,000 of deductible. So you pretty much need to spend $34,000 before this insurance is going to kick in any meaningful way. So the first thing you might ask is, well, still, how far does $7,000 go? Or you pay $5,000, what does that cover? Well, one trip to the emergency room can blow those sums completely away. And I'm going to give you a story of a young girl who was actually going to a Caribbean medical school that did require supplementary insurance and a travel plan, and it did cost between $3,000 or $4,000. But one day she was in one of the Caribbean islands. She was jet skiing, and she fell off the jet ski, and she happened to lacerate her spleen. She was taken to the local hospital, and she spent a couple days in the ICU, and then she was flown to her home in the Mayo Clinic, and then spent a couple more days in the ICU before she finally was discharged home and recovered. The flight alone, the med flight from the Caribbean back home, cost over $75,000. Because most people don't realize that if you're medevaced home, it's actually a private Learjet that's all set up with all the equipment, and there's either a nurse and or a physician that accompanies you for that 4.5 hour flight. In addition, there was another $80,000 of ICU expenses on top of that. So her overall bill for a lacerated spleen in the Caribbean was almost $150,000, which she would have had to pay full freight if she had not paid the supplemental insurance for her college. And that's a common thing, because if you think about kids, what happens to kids in college? If they're not perfectly healthy, they get into car accidents, they might have a sporting accident, they might break their ACL, or God forbid, they have a life-threatening illness, either new onset diabetes or maybe even worse. It's catastrophic. And when you talk about catastrophic, anything that involves an emergency room and or multiple stays in the hospital or ICU stays, you're automatically talking about tens and thousands of dollars, which makes that supplemental insurance of the college seem like the biggest bargain in the world. So it's one of those things, if you have to use it, you'll really, really appreciate that you have it.
But it's important in your planning and for your costs that you figure out, am I going to need this or not? Because if you get whacked with an extra $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, you weren't expecting it. I mean, that's a nice chunk of cheese, and it's funny just to show the cost when Anika and I, we did a article on health insurance like this, but it's been a while now. Stanford was $4,900 at that time. Now $5,200. We also talked about once when the students at Cornell went on strike because the school imposed a mandatory fee on everybody's cost to cover health insurance. And they put it on everybody's bill and the mandatory required fees. And there was a strike that went on at the school. So this is real. And some of the takeaways is, one, find out whether or not your policy is going to cover everything you need at any of the schools on your list. And if it's not, find out what the cost is going to be and make sure you take that cost into consideration when you're figuring out what you're going to have to pay.
Yes, and I didn't make that clear. So the point being is that even though these school fees sound a lot, in my particular case, they're significantly less than the deductible we would have to pay if, in fact, our daughter got sick. So instead of paying a $7,000 deductible, well, it's covered by the school fees, which could be $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. So it's still a relatively good bargain if you have to use that insurance. But if your deductible is only $500 and you have a blue chip insurance, then if it's a comparable policy, then you may want to get the waiver because apples to apples, you know that your insurance coverage will cover those contingencies. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And when Dave told me what he paid for health insurance, I thought two things. One is I thought, you fool, why did you ever complain? Because what happened, when I was at the Westtown school, I paid $1,000 a year for a family plan, Blue Cross Blue Shield. And when I moved to Georgia, we had Blue Cross Blue Shield again, but it cost me $5,000. And I was like, man, why am I having to pay $5,000? But I have a $500 deductible for all this stuff. And then I found out what Dave paid with that crazy deductible, and I'm like, oh man, I actually have it pretty good. But it's important, it is so important to read the fine print. Now, interesting, the guy who wrote this article, he's not a financial planner, but he's in that financial world. And he's like, how come I didn't know about this stuff? And he did some digging to find out, how hidden it is. And it really can be hidden. It's one of the things that people sometimes who are fairly knowledgeable about the college process don't know about this. Yeah. And so there's one quote I want to read. He says from the article, should your waiver request be denied, as it was for my son at Cornell, contact your health insurer to see whether you can get a letter documenting that your health plan meets the school's requirements. Yep. You may then want to submit the waiver with the letter. Should you still get denied, your college will have an internal process for submitting a waiver request to someone who's responsible for student health insurance. Then he says, if you have an HMO plan that does not have facilities in the state of your college or any limits in your plan on its out-of-area network, you will likely face challenge in getting this waiver, as will students with an out-of-state Medicaid plan or a plan that only covers catastrophic illness. International students will almost certainly need to buy the school's plan.
Yeah. And I want to dovetail to that because in case people are saying, is this legal? He makes a point. The ACA allows colleges to require health insurance and set their own standards based on what the school determines its students need. They can make health insurance comparable to the plan they offer a condition of enrollment. So the point is, not only do the colleges have the right to do this, but they're completely legally empowered to deny your kid enrollment if you don't take their plan, if you don't actually, that waiver is not accepted. So
thanks, Dave. I'm glad you brought that point up because I almost forgot about that. Good stuff. Yeah. So buyer beware.
So he wraps up the 5 steps that students and parents need to take. Number 1, once you select a college, check into its insurance requirements as soon as possible. Number 2, look for the college opt-out notice that should come by midsummer and complete and submit the waiver on time, because if you get that waiver in late, they may not accept it or they may charge you extra. Number 3, if your waiver is denied, contact your insurer and find out the steps to resubmit. Number 4, look for the health insurance fee on the tuition reimbursement statement because unfortunately, many times it's well hidden and you may not initially notice it. And number 5, evaluate whether the student health insurance plan is a good option to consider when compared to your own plan.
And I'm going to throw in a number 6. Yeah. It's something I've been talking about with Anika. Build your relationship with your financial aid officer. So you have somebody you can just reach out to. You know who you are. You know who they are. Even if they direct you to a specialist in healthcare, they should be able to answer the majority of your questions on. It's a very common question. It'll be a very unique question that they couldn't either have the answer or get the answer for you. That's point number 6.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, Anika, I'm going to take you back to a blast from the past.
Ooh.
Do you remember when we used to do our top 10 countdowns?
Oh, that is a blast.
Isn't that like going back a couple years?
Good gracious. How long have we been doing this? Yeah,
well, we're coming up for almost finishing year 3.
Oh, wow.
About to February, we'll kick off year 4. So it was probably a good 2 years ago. We did that,
I
right?
miss those. Now that you bring it up, I do miss those.
Well, I got another one for us. This is the 10 people with the largest number of followers on Twitter. Nothing to do with college admissions.
Clearly.
Totally nothing to do with college admissions.
I need a little break, a little brain break.
Number 10, Ariana Grande, the singer.
Okay.
78.7 million. So we'll count all the way up to number 1. Do something a little different. Go down memory lane a little bit. Okay, our book chapter looks at. I
thought you listen. I forgot how it worked. I thought you were going to do all 10.
No. I'm gonna do one. You see?
Oh, okay.
See, that's where you know we're having an old pod. We're getting older. We don't even remember how we did things before.
Okay, Ariana, you are the spotlight for today, girl.
Absolutely. So our book chapter looks at, if I am just flat broke, what is the cheapest way to go to college?
Mm-hmm.
And so I listed 5 ways in this chapter. Do we want to just talk about the different ones? What do you want to comment on?
I guess so. I guess I would say the way I took it is that you have 3 main ways.
Okay.
It sounds like you suggested in terms of cutting costs back. And then the other category.
So you want to introduce the 3 main, and I'll take 2. There's 2 others that are worthy of talking about. So
yeah. So the first one is going after an associate's degree as opposed to a bachelor's, 4-year program.
Mm-hmm.
Because to your point in the chapter, you can still earn some pretty darn good money in certain areas with an associate's degree, which you listed air traffic controller making over $120,000. Good gracious. Who would have knew?
Of a 2-year degree. And then also radiologist, technologist, nuclear technicians. Those are a couple ones where you make north of 80,000. Of course, we'll be the first to say, don't just pick a job because of the money, because if you're miserable 10 hours a day, your life's going to suck. But we just want to let people know there are some possibilities out there.
So an associate's degree, is it like half the cost of a bachelor's? Like, what's the big difference in it?
Well, the biggest difference is it's 2 years, not 4.
Oh, yeah, right.
That's the biggest difference. And it depends. Most cases, not all, it's non-residential. So then there's, you're saving all those costs as well. Okay. And then, check out technical schools. There's a great opportunity there for people. I mean, I had a student this week. It was actually the grandmother who talked to me about the student. The student lives with the grandmother. And, and we were talking about her plans. And she said, you know what? She's always wanted to do hair. And so she's just going to go and get her training at Atlanta Technical or Chattahoochee Technical here in Atlanta and get her side hustle down. And then in her case, she actually wants to go back to 4-year college. She's actually going to graduate and just either still be 16 or just turn 17. So she's like, I'm really young. You know what? I'm going to go get another skill. And I supported her 100% because some people at her school were saying, why you want to do that? Because she already has 11 hours of college credit from dual enrollment. I was like, why you want to go backwards? And I'm all for having like things to fall back on and side hustles and multiple revenue streams, especially if you enjoy what you do.
All righty. Well, let's go dive into the second one. So the next one is going to your local community college again for 2 years. But you say to then transfer to a 4-year college as long as your credits transfer accordingly.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just a fantastic way to get the first 2 years free. I mean, the average cost for community college is under $4,000. And to get the first 2 years banged out, now it's a lot better in some states than others. Some states work like a hand in a glove when it comes to community college, just feeding seamlessly into their 4-year system. States, for example, California is fantastic. Florida's really good. Texas is good. New York is good. Washington State. There's some states that are like Georgia's not great that way other than Perimeter. Perimeter now feeds right into Georgia State. But so it can vary from state to state how easy this is. You do want to make sure that they've got a really well developed and articulation agreement that's almost airtight. An articulation agreement spells out what's going to transfer.
Okay. All right. And the third main one is to attend an in-state school that's close to home and commute. Go back and forth. Don't stay on campus. And that's what is that? I know it's thousands of dollars, but it could be up to anywhere around $20,000 you could save just by doing that, right?
Yeah, because first of all, as an in-state school, you're already getting a substantial reduction just because, one, it's public, two, it's in-state, so you're being rewarded for paying taxes over the years. If it's a regional public, it's going to be even less than a flagship cost-wise. And then you're cutting out two of the big expenses, room and board, which are, that's usually in that 8 to 18 range, depending on the school. And then you're significantly cutting back on transportation compared to going across the country. Your transportation costs are low, room and board. And you still got to factor in a little money for transportation from home back to school and whatever you're eating at home. Right. And who knows, maybe your parents make you pay rent. I mean, who knows? I'm not saying it may be completely free, but it depends on that arrangement, right? But it's substantial savings there, and it's a great way to get a degree at a really affordable price. And this is important to talk about this topic, because not everybody has the ability to just go spend 30, 40, 50, 60, 80,000 on college, Right. A lot of people are just not in that situation. So that's why we're talking about this today.
Yeah. But we also we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up the point that we've made in the past about, the importance the importance of the on-campus experience, kids really being engaged with the campus life. So you can still do that. Obviously, it'll be different if you're not living there, but I guess they would have to take the extra step to go above and beyond to really engage with the life of the campus and what's happening. A little different nowadays because of COVID, obviously, but
Right. The point you're making is we're not trying to say it's apples for apples, like living at home and commuting in terms of having a residential experience. We're not implying that there's no value to that, because I certainly will attest that there's tremendous value to having that residential experience in terms of just things you learn about yourself when you're in a context of other peers and things you're exposed to. So I appreciate you shouting that out. So the other two that I have on here, one is taking online classes. And, it can be something like, Arizona State or all these programs, Purdue Global, that have been developed. That are out there, but it can also be something like edX or Coursera that have gotten better and better at not only offering classes, but in some classes, in many instances, taking courses that lead to jobs. Now, interesting article called "Here's the Real Scoop on How Online Classes Can Get You Hired" by Aaron Grenewald. And it's a survey that was done last year. Now, mind you, the survey was done by Coursera, so you bet there's a vested interest here. So I'd love to see some more outside research from some other, entities. But according to this survey, 72% of respondents reported career benefits to taking the class. That sounds very plausible to me. 43% reported improved candidacy for a new job. And here's the big number. 26% actually say they landed a new gig because of the courses that you take. So, there's things out there that you can take that particularly give you the skills that you need. So that's one option, is taking online courses. And another one is be from a under-resourced family and be a gifted and talented student and apply to some of the most selective schools that have incredibly generous aid packages. For example, if you're gifted and talented enough to get into the Questbridge program, their match program covers the full cost of attendance. That's a lot. And every year around 1,000 kids get that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All expenses paid. And so, there's an example. And I'm talking about the most selective institutions in the country. So now you have to be extremely gifted and talented to do that. So that's a small percentage. But the point is, there is an option if you're really gifted and talented and you're under resources. There are colleges out there, in my college spotlight, which will come up after we talk about this. Anika, I talk about Williams College. 17% of students at Williams College paid nothing last year. Nothing. This is a school that's 78 to 80 grand.
Wow.
Now, when I say nothing, they still had to have a job. They had to have campus employment and had to have some summer employment. So they had to have some skin in the game. But as far as sending money to the school, no, none. So, there's an example, but it's extremely hard to get into Williams. But there's another option. We just need to let people know because people get sticker shock. They see the price and they're like, no way. Don't even bother. So there we have it. Friends, I almost forgot a sixth very important way. Something we've talked about a lot on this podcast. Certificate programs. These programs are often offered by colleges, and increasingly so, offer training in specific fields. You can take certificate programs as a college graduate, but there are many that are designed for students with a high school diploma or even a GED, just people that want some additional training at an entry-level position. And according to Tracy Levine, the CEO of Advantage Talent, which is a professional training and coaching company in Atlanta, many high school students' technical certifications are the most direct route to a good career. And the reason for that is because employers have so much input into creating these certifications, so they have direct business value. And what's great about them is they're so much shorter than a 2 or 4 year program. They may be as short as 8 or 12 weeks, 6 months, or they could be around a year. Anything else, or you think that's it? Is that a wrap?
Let's talk about your birthday. That happened. Happy belated birthday, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was fun. It's you start getting up there and they come faster and faster. I tell you that. They just zoom up there. Like, how did that happen? Just yesterday, I remember when my mom sent me this huge poster board. It was really cool, and had all these pictures of myself as a kid and all that stuff. And that was for the big 4-0. That big 4-0 was now 17 years ago.
Any more poster boards?
No, that was it. No more poster boards.
Okay. All right. Now we can wrap it up. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you. Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com.
All right. So bonus content continues. It continues. And now we're moving into, which we touched on a little bit, but there's so much more to talk about. And we're talking about how COVID is literally changing college admissions as we speak. So Mark, how you want to start this thing off?
Yeah, and this is going to be a 3-parter. I'm going to talk about a lot of different components. Today, I want to mostly focus on debunking a myth. And it's a myth I get all the time. I hear all the time. And when I attend admission sessions, I hear them peppered with this all the time. When I talk to admissions officers out of these sessions, it's one of the most frequently asked questions they get. And it goes like this. Well, last year, a lot of students, because of COVID, decided that they were going to stay home and take a gap year. And so does that mean it's going to be a lot harder to get into this year because those kids are going to come, which shrinks the number of spots you have. So therefore, it's going to be harder for me. And one of the truisms about COVID is, I can't say this across the board, but almost across the board, very high percentage of schools will have a higher acceptance rate this year. So that's actually the opposite is true. Instead of it being harder to get in, it's going to be either incrementally easier or significantly easier for probably 95% of the schools. And any idea why, Anika?
Well, I mean, because people are not coming back. You know, people are deciding not to return. So that scares admissions folks. They got to fill their seats up. And I want to say that it is some acknowledgement around the, you know, all the things that are happening to these kids during this time. You know, all the bad impact that it's had in terms of their grades and just them having to navigate their courses and all that stuff. So I hope there's some kind of empathy laced in there somewhere on their part. It's the reason why they're being a little more open to more students, I guess.
So there's a lot of reasons. You hit on one of them. A new study came out and it said freshman enrollment is down 16%. 16. Now, that's really skewed in some ways because like the community colleges, they're just getting devastated. So it's not true. Those numbers, it's not 16% for like public flagships and you know what I mean? And if you break schools down into different categories, the numbers vary quite a bit. If you look at the for-profits versus the four-year nonprofits versus grad school versus baccalaureate schools versus, you know, flagship colleges, regional publics. I mean, they're all different. Online, for you know, all these different categories. So it varies a lot in categories. But so you've got less students applying. Okay, that's one thing. Then you have less retention because of COVID. So more people leaving. You also have devastating international numbers, which Dave and I are going to be talking about that in the news coming up. I mean, the numbers that come out of international enrollment are just beyond belief. I'll probably talk about that a little bit as we get into points 2 and 3 on here as well, part 2 and 3 a little bit, because that is part of impact of COVID. International is just, my goodness, I've seen these numbers are scary. So, but you also have the expenses of the school too, you know. They have to COVID protect their school now. The cleaning costs alone are pretty substantial.
Oh, wow.
Plus, they're moving more and more students from doubles to singles, you know, in order to have some social distancing. There's a lot of expense involved in that. Reworking your dorms and, you know, to reconfiguring. There's expenses there. They lost a lot of money when they had to reimburse people for room and board in the spring of last year. Then you have the schools that have hospitals and they're not doing elective surgeries. I mean, hundreds of millions it's costing them. So what do you do when you have a school that all of a sudden has substantially more expenses and potentially, maybe likely, depending on the school, less revenue coming in? More expenses, less revenue. Well, the only thing you can do, well, you know, you could try to fundraise, but this is an incredibly difficult environment to fundraise in. And the amount you'd have to fundraise to supplant that loss is so substantial that it's not really practical as a comprehensive solution. The only way really to do it is to attempt to enroll more students because most schools are tuition driven. If you can increase your enrollment, then you can supplant those costs. And so that's what you're going to see most schools attempt to do. Now, not everyone's going to be able to be successful doing it because it's competitive out there. And depending on where you're placed in the marketplace, you may try and not succeed, but you're going to try. And what that's going to mean is higher acceptance rates, you know, cast a wider net to rein students in. And I went back and looked, Anika, because if this is true at some of the most selective colleges, then you know it's going to be true at the least selective or less selective colleges.
All right.
So I just went back and looked at the data from last year to the year before. And you can see it starting to happen because obviously COVID really hit in March and people saw what was happening, right? I mean, people were sent home. And so they were, you know, it started then. So they were prudent enough to realize, okay, what can we do in last year's class to adjust for it? Multiple people who I've talked with on the podcast, even that I've had on the podcast, such as Gail Villanueva at Richmond, Sam Prouty at Middlebury, they both talked about how they cast a wider net with a wider acceptance rate, knowing that with COVID, they were going to have loss of revenue, you know, more gap years, less maybe retention. Everybody, so for the most part, most people did. So once again, I don't want people out there thinking, ooh, goodness, I can all of a sudden go to any single school I want to because of this. It's not quite like that.
Go to Harvard real quick.
Right. But let's just look at it. So I'm just looking at some schools. American University, their acceptance rate went up 2%. Amherst College, 1%. Boston University, 1%. Carleton College, 1%. Columbia, 1%. Dartmouth 1%, Duke 1%, Emory 2%, Georgetown 2%, Georgia Tech 1%, Middlebury 8%. Now let's look at some schools, not from a standpoint of percentages, but in terms of like raw numbers. Like how many did you accept in the 2023 class, which would be current sophomores, versus the 2024 class, which are current freshmen? So at NYU, they accepted 12,300 students in the current sophomore class, but in the freshman class, they accepted 13,000. So they had 700 more acceptances. And at Northeastern, they accepted 11,160 in the sophomore class, 12,160 last year. So 1,000 more acceptances. University of Florida took 400 kids more. Here's one, University of Southern California. They took right around 7,460 kids in the sophomore class. And in the freshman class, they took 9,500. So an increase of 2,240 kids. So people saw this starting to happen, and they made this adjustment last year a little bit. Now you've had a whole full year to plan for it and to even have more expenses. And I'm having these conversations with admissions officers, and they're consistently saying this. What do you think, Anika?
So are you saying that this is good news for strong students who can pay, or good news for strong students who can take out a loan, or both?
Oh, you're starting to get me into parts 2 and 3. I'm going to start getting into money.
Pause. We can wait till next week, but that is the big question.
Yeah. So overall, I will say both. Overall, we'll say both because, look, there's a certain percentage of people who need financial aid, and you still need them. And remember, schools don't usually think in terms of everything or nothing, right? I mean, yeah, there are a lot of schools that it's very difficult if they're need aware to give a full award from a financial standpoint, but it's an expectation colleges have that not everybody can pay. So it's built into their system that there are going to be a certain percentage of people that need money. And so you still want them. You want them for the socioeconomic diversity, and you also want them because you need them.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you think that I'm going to be down 16% in my applicants, or I might have retention issues, or we need to make up because we're $200 to $300 million in the hole from last year, then what you're going to attempt to do is not just have more acceptances. Remember, more acceptances don't bring more money in. You're actually hoping you can grow your class. And there are examples of that. Like I look at Georgia State, I look at Kennesaw State. These are schools in Georgia. Their enrollment went up substantially last year because they had far more acceptances and they were able to be successful at getting them to enroll. And so that's how some schools are still able to be doing quite well financially, And so this is, so it's a myth. It's a myth that's going to be harder this year. It's actually going to be easier in overwhelming number of instances. I only think of a couple schools in my mind where I think it may be harder. So it's so rare. Why? Because they're going to decrease their acceptance rate. Increase their, I keep saying it the wrong way. You're going to have a higher acceptance rate. Increase it, and see what happens when you turn 57, you lose a marble up there. So, what about 58? It's going to be scary.
Lord.
And so anyway, it's good news, but I don't want people to just take it to an extreme. And if you were a student that, let's say, was going to have a really, really hard time getting in a school that has, let's say, a 70% acceptance rate, all of a sudden you think you can apply to one that has a 17% acceptance rate. Like, good luck with that. It's more incremental. And it's funny because even today, once again, Williams College, College Spotlight, they normally take, 1,197 kids. That's been about the average number of kids they've taken over the last few years. And then they increased that pretty significantly in this class. Like for them, about 55 more kids, which might not seem like a lot compared to a big school, but from a percentage standpoint, that's a pretty big percent. You're taking about 4% more kids than you did before. So does it make sense, Anika?
It does. It absolutely does.
So this is just one. I'm going to get into another next couple of weeks. I won't be covering just one. We'll cover a lot more in each of those two parts. But to me, this was an important one. And I really wanted people to understand sort of the financial and the business side of a school and what goes on behind the scenes. And they need, this sounds so crass, but they need butts in the seats. You work at a school, you know that.
Yes, unfortunately I do.
You can't get butts in the seats without acceptances. It's all good. Well, Nick, what you got going on for Thanksgiving?
We are coming through your way.
You are? You coming to the ATL?
Well, we're going through ATL, going down to the country. With my mom.
You can't leave the country.
I know.
You go to North Carolina, the country. You're in the country.
It's time to see the folks down there. And I know we're not supposed to be traveling extensively and all that stuff, but this is, we got to do this one. So we don't have too much of a choice.
Are you going to see your mom?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, have a good time in the ATL and in the greater Macon area,
the greater Beeville area, Barnesville.
Yeah, Barnesville. I've never been to Barnesville.
Oh,
if I go to Barnesville, where should I go? Am I missing anything?
Go through the stoplight and on to the whatever store is there right now. I don't know.
Okay.
So I'll get you there.
Well, I know this isn't the time, but one of these times we'll have to let's get through COVID. We'll have to grab a meal or do a coffee or something.
I know. Long overdue.
Long overdue. Safe travels.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, friends, last week we had our first part of our interview with Dr. Lisa Rouff, and I'm very excited about this interview. We're doing two-parters. This is the last of the last part of our first topic, which looks at careers in mental health therapy. And then we're going to transition to 7 different mental health barriers, problems, challenges that students are encountering today that hinder them from reaching their peak performance. And Lisa's going to tell us what to do about these problems. But here's our last part for today. Lisa will describe the differences between a licensed psychologist and a clinical psychologist. Lisa talks about options for mental health counseling with a 2-year degree. Lisa talks about various educational pathways, including the Psych D and the PhD, and postdoc study. Lisa talks about career paths in private practice as a clinician when you become a licensed clinical social worker. And she talks about the importance of experience. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
So I know once you decide that you are interested in a career in mental health counseling or therapy, you still have a lot of options. So let's talk about some of the different choices. I know there's licensed psychologists, there's clinical psychologists. Why don't we just start with those two and talk to us about what the differences are between a licensed psychologist and a clinical psychologist when it comes to, different things like work setting, compensation, education, growth, anything you want to comment, really.
Right. Well, the first distinction I would make between the licensed psychologist and a clinical psychologist is that clinical psychology is your degree. So that's the degree that you get from your university. You have to fulfill all the requirements for that, usually an internship, a dissertation or research project, several practicums, and coursework. But licensure comes from a state-by-state basis, and that requires the degree. But just having the degree doesn't allow you to become licensed. So they are going to require, depending on the state, different activities like a postdoctoral fellowship, taking a licensing exam, taking a state-based licensing exam. So there are many clinical psychologists who don't end up getting licensed. And a lot of them might work in research, at a university. They might be professors. They might work in industry or in administrative settings. They haven't gone on. They've decided they don't want to practice clinically, and they haven't gone on to get the license. So licensed psychologists, and most states won't let you call yourself a psychologist or a licensed clinical psychologist unless they have licensed you. They are allowed to work clinically, and then you can work in private practice, you can work for hospitals, you can work in group practices, outpatient, primary care settings. There's a number of different settings that licensed psychologists can work in.
Interesting. This whole field's fascinating to me because my own daughter, Joy, is in the process of applying to grad schools for a master's in mental health counseling. And then this is under the School of Education.
Right.
And so it's like a 2-year program and a number of hours. But one thing that appeals to her about it is that you can get licensure after this and you can have private practice. And she's not at least at this point, she doesn't have the drive to go get the doctorate, but she's like, oh, I can have my own private practice with a master's working with families. That's kind of attractive to her. And like you, she's someone who's completely fascinated by people and has a lot of empathy. So can you talk about that path to a career in mental health counseling, getting a 2-year mental health counseling master's degree and getting licensure?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, one path is going and getting a PhD or a PsyD in clinical psychology. And the school part of it usually takes 4 to 5 years. It includes either a dissertation or, in the case of a PsyD, like maybe a clinical presentation or a comprehensive research paper. And that is one path. So that's like a 5-year path. And then you have to do a postdoc on top of it. So it's like a 6-year path. The reason why people might do that path is because they are interested in getting higher reimbursement. So I would probably get reimbursed at a higher rate than Joy would because I have a PhD. But there are also a lot of other paths to becoming a therapist. And I think that being a PhD or PsyD psychologist is becoming less popular for a lot of reasons. And one of them is that it takes forever. I think I was 30 before I had my first real job. And my friends, meanwhile, were working in banking and, buying boats and having all kinds of fun. And I, had an apartment that I had to break into a lot of the times. It was a basement apartment next to the L. So I remember feeling kind of bad about that. It takes forever. Whereas the programs that Joy is thinking about doing is in, like you mentioned, it's in the education department. It's a master's in counseling. So in that, you take 2 years of classes. Usually these programs have to be accredited by the National Counseling Association. And then you do a practicum and an internship. And then I think the internship is about a year. And then you can sit for the licensing exam. And that depends on the state. So for instance, in Illinois, it's called an LCPC, a licensed professional counselor. And you can sit for that exam and then you can get licensed.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, when I talked about private or outside scholarships for 2 episodes in a row, probably about 3 or 4 months ago, I talked about things like searching local. I talked about workplace scholarships, membership scholarships, special condition scholarships. I talked about getting an accountability partner and setting goals. I talked about self-assessing if you meet the criteria. And I talked about getting good at communicating your compelling narrative. I also talked about using at least one national database. But what I never did was tell you my favorite scholarship database. And that's the subject for the recommended resource for episode 148, which is goingmerry.com, GOINGMERRY.com. And what makes Going Merry so special is that you fill out a detailed scholarship profile one time, and they match you to scholarships, and they autofill the scholarship forms for multiple other scholarships. In some cases, you don't need to do anything else at all for these other scholarships. 75% of the work is done in most instances. You may have one essay or a few other questions to answer. The Wall Street Journal says goingmerry.com has the most exhaustive scholarship database in the country. They have a great tracking tool for high school counselors to see which scholarships their students have completed. They have an excellent FAFSA completion tool. I encourage you to sign up for a demo. Just go to goingmerry.com, sign up for a demo. This is a great way to earn thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars for college. We will now return to the final part of my interview with Dr. Lisa Rouff on careers in mental health therapy. Yeah, it's fascinating. There's so many different paths to get you there because, University of Georgia, where she's at, they've got a really cool plan where they pair you up with a mentor who's graduated from the school. And they gave Joy literally dozens of people to pick and choose from where she could read their bios and everything. And so she found one that she really identified with. And this is someone who had graduated from, University of Georgia with her undergrad degree, had gone on to get a master's in social work at UTK, University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And for the last 7 years, she's had a private practice in social work. And so I realized there's another path there to go into private practice by focusing on social work. So what can you talk about that? What can you share with us about that path and how it sort of differs from the other two we've discussed so far?
Right. Well, there are many schools of social work that will offer a master's in social work. And from that, you can get a licensed social work license. And in Illinois, then there's a higher licensure from that, which is a licensed clinical social work license. And that requires more supervision postgraduate. Social work is a really broad field, and not all master's programs in social work deal with clinical issues. Many social workers work in public policy. They work providing support with people getting resources in elder care situations and other social service situations, and they can work in government settings. So not all social workers are clinicians. So I would advise anyone who is interested in this path to make sure whatever program they're applying to has a specific clinical track. But you would, to your program, you're going to do your coursework, and then you're going to do a practicum and get clinical supervision with that. And then you graduate and you pass the social work exam, and then you get your LSW. And then from there, you have to do 2 more years of supervised hours. So that's like around 4,000 hours of clinical work, and you have to get supervised by an LCSW. And then you can apply and become a licensed clinical social worker. It's a great path, though, and it's got a very good growth outlook. I think I looked up, and it's 16% increase, which is higher than many other professions. And you can work in hospitals, outpatient clinics, group practice, solo practice, and social service agencies.
So, and what kind of compensation are you talking about for these various different professions that we've discussed?
So, in terms of compensation, clinical PhD level psychologists, their average salaries are generally between $70,000 to $90,000 a year. And according to the Bureau of Labor, the average salary last year was $80,370 per year, or about $38.64 per hour.
That's a lot of school. That's a lot of school to not make 6 figures.
You have to love it because you're not going to get rich doing it. For the master's level, the pay would be around $48,000 a year, and the hourly rate is $23, $24 an hour.
There's more than just money to life, I'm sure it doesn't feel that way at times if it's hard paying the bills, but
right.
But I know it can be very fulfilling work.
Yeah, psychology is not for people who want to get rich quick.
So, is there anything that we have not discussed, either alternative paths to careers as a mental therapist, or preparation for the job, or character traits? Anything all that we haven't discussed, or do you think we covered everything?
A few points I'd like to make. The first one is, let's say you want to get a PhD or a master's in psychology, counseling, or social work. What's going to make you a competitive applicant for those graduate programs? I would encourage anyone who wants to do that to volunteer and get as much clinical experience as possible during their undergraduate years, or like me, if you've already graduated, before you apply to graduate school. That can be difficult because you don't have the experience that you need to do a lot of high-level work. So you're probably going to be working in the trenches, like I did, working 2 a.m. at the hospital. But I highly recommend that. That's going to make people much more competitive applicants, and it's also going to allow them to see if this field is truly for them. The second thing I suggest that people do is to get hooked up with a research advisor during their undergraduate years and do research in mental health. It looks great on the application. You can learn a lot. And again, it can help you decide, do I want to go more into the research part of this, or do I want to go more into the clinical part of this? I also want to mention that there are alternative paths to being a therapist that don't require licensure. Now, if you're not licensed, you're not going to get reimbursed by insurance. And you can't call yourself a psychologist, a counselor, a psychotherapist. So people might sort of couch that as they're a coach. But there are people out there who don't have this kind of formal training who still provide these services.
That's interesting.
Next week in the news, colleges woo students with bargain tuition rates by Emma Whitford of Inside Higher Ed. Mark and Anika will discuss what is net price and what is a net price calculator. Our bonus content is part 2 on how COVID is changing college admissions this year. And our interview is part 1 of 2 with Dr. Lisa Rouff on 7 mental health challenges that students face and how to deal with them. And our college spotlight is the University of Houston.
But our college spotlight today is Williams College. Special request. Thank you to Jillian, one of our listeners in California, who asked us to spotlight Williams College. Well, if you are an extremely bright student and you're ambitious, but you want to be around nice kids and you want most of your classes to average 13 or in some cases be as small as 2. You want to be in a collaborative environment. You want to be in a tight-knit community. If you're an outdoors lover, you love nature and you don't mind being in the cold weather. You don't need to have all the international cuisine and everything you get in city life or even suburban life. If you want to go to a college with rigor, but a lot of support. If you want to go to a college with resources on top of resources, Williams College is as good as it gets. Williams is and its rival school, Amherst, which is also located in Western Mass. They have several things in common, one of which they share purple for their school colors.
All right, with Northwestern.
There you go. But when it comes to liberal arts and science schools that almost exclusively have undergraduate courses, these two are the 2 most selective schools in the country. Dave, guess what their mascot is?
Oh.
I'll give you a hint. Their color is purple.
Purple. Okay, it's got to be the purple hokey bird.
Nice try. We
What's
know there's
purple?
one hokey bird.
Wait, stop. Mascot and it's purple. Barney the dinosaur? I mean, what the heck is purple?
The purple cow.
The purple cow.
The purple
Cow
cow.
say purple.
Okay, Williams College. Let me say, Williams is not for the faint of heart. It is not uncommon at all.
Wait. I'm circling back. Are you serious? It's a purple cow?
It does, yes. It's their mascot, the purple cow.
All I can say is that
You like your mascots, man. I got to get them in there. I've learned that about you. Got to get the mascot in.
The only excuse is if that was done during the peace-loving days of the 1960s where they had some hallucinogenics come up with that mascot.
I'll leave that one alone. It is not uncommon for a student to get into schools like a Brown or a Yale or a Harvard and not get into Williams. In fact, when I was doing college counseling in boarding school at the Westtown School, Williams frustrated us. We had several meetings with their college counselors because if a student did not apply early decision, and if they were not a recruited athlete or an underrepresented student of color, or if one of their parents did not go to Williams, they almost needed to walk on water to get into Williams. It is an extremely tough admit because these are small schools, admitting about 1,200 kids. And by the time you take away the early decision apps, which is about half the class, 600, take away the recruited athletes, 30%, students of color, which is sizable, I'll share those numbers later, and alumni, they're just very, very few spots. But they have smart kids. In fact, Williams produces more Fulbright scholars than any other liberal arts and science college in the country. They are located in the northwest corner of Massachusetts on the border of New York and Vermont, about 3 hours away from New York City and about 3 hours away from Boston. Williams is tucked away in a small hamlet in the Berkshires. When I visited, it was so far out in the middle of nowhere, my cell phone didn't work. Yeah. But I've been told by credible sources that they have fixed that problem since then. That was 3 years ago, last time I was there. Now, if you heard my interview with Sam Prouty, director of admission at Middlebury, where he made the case for remote colleges and the advantage to going there, all of that applies to Williams. And if you didn't hear that interview, I'd strongly encourage you to hear that. That was one of our better interviews. Just go to yourcollegeblindkid.com, click the interviews tab, and it's just a few interviews back. Williams has 2,200 students, up around, they've increased their size a little bit, which a lot of schools have done, by the way, since the pandemic. And I'll be talking about that a little bit more coming up in a 3-part series I'm doing with Anika on admissions in the age of COVID. But Williams has resources galore. 64 different courses of study, 700 courses for a small student body, and a 7-to-1 ratio of faculty to students, one of the lowest in the country. When you're at Williams, all of the academic courses are divided into 3 different areas of study: social sciences, arts and humanities, and math and sciences. And as part of their distribution requirements, every student has to take at least 3 courses in all 3 of those areas of study. And then there's also some courses you have to take in quantitative reasoning and writing. You don't declare a major until the end of your sophomore year, so they have no problem at all with students coming in undecided. In fact, a lot of times they encourage it. They like you to come in and take 8 courses in 8 different areas and explore the curriculum and then figure out what you want to major in. When it's time to major, you'll need to take either 9 or 10 classes in your required major. So more than 40% of students at Williams double major, finish up with 2 majors. And they also have concentrations. Now, I know this can get confusing. At some schools, concentrations, like at Brown, are majors, and at Williams, concentrations are minors. Go figure why they have to make this stuff so confusing. But they offer a wide range of concentrations. Another thing that Williams is known for is their winter study. It's extremely popular. So Williams uses what's called a 4-1-4 calendar. What that means is, first semester, you'll take 4 classes. Then over the winter, you'll take a winter study course, which, Dave, is basically like what Cornell College did last week. It's right. A 3.5-week intense. Well, I shouldn't say intense. It's intense in that it's only one class that you're concentrating on. You're in class about 6 to 8 hours a day there. Everything's graded pass-fail. And they offer some very unique courses. For example, one course they recently taught is by a Williams alum who's been an editor at the New York Times for 25 years. 8 students in there sitting around the table talking about politics and current events. And Dave, I could see Lauren in there, or you, by the way. Yeah. That's a course. Another class they have in there is a class on glass blowing taught by a chemistry professor. So they have all these classes, 3.5 weeks, and people love that because, with being the pass-fail, it takes a lot of the pressure away. And they do some fun things there over the winter in Northwest Massachusetts. So they're outdoorsy. What do? They do snowshoeing and skating and snowboarding and skiing to give some. That's the leisure. Those are some of the activities. Another very appealing feature of Williams is their Oxford style tutorial courses. Are you familiar with Oxford style teaching is, Dave?
Yes, I am, because to a degree, because Lauren did that course in Oxford for about 4 weeks. But is it the Socratic method? Is that what you're talking about?
So the way it works is they have 2 students and 1 professor.
Oh,
2
wow.
students and 1 professor. And these Williams tutorial courses, like I said, they have over 65 of them, and they're offered in every single discipline at all levels. Even freshmen can take them. And more than 10% of all their courses are offered this way. The way it works is one student has to do a research. Well, the faculty member goes over the assignment, and then one student is the lead, and they do maybe a 5-page research paper. Depends on what it is. It's a different thing if it's a dance class or it's an art class.
Right.
But they may do a 5-page research paper, and then they have to present that research paper at least 24 hours in advance to the other student as well as to the professor. And then the other student has to come prepared with a 1 to 2 page critique of their argument, and they need to verbally interact with the other student while the professor engages and interacts with them.
Ooh.
So it's just, So it's like, so a lot of times people are intimidated. At first it's like, one other student, me and the professor, I feel naked. You know, there's no place to hide. I don't want to look stupid with this other smart Williams kid and this maybe smarter professor. But what students say is it is an incredible way to develop your critical thinking, to learn how to defend your ideas verbally, to take ownership of your academic process, and to improve your persuasive skills and your writing and your research skills. So students rave about how the benefits of it. And some professors come with tea and cookies because it's just you and one other person, tea and cookies, and go dive into the content, and there's no place to hide.
Wow.
That's some deep stuff. There's no way you're not going to learn in that environment.
No. And that does sound a lot like the Socratic method.
Another distinctive of Williams is the amount of paid summer science research that is done. So 41% of students do summer research, paid research. Wow. They have over 300 people that participate in a summer program. Students get room and board and a stipend to work on a range of research projects. And they have a number of special programs. One is their Summer Institute in American Foreign Policy. Here you study American foreign policy. You can intern in D.C. You can work with think tanks. Another well-known program they have over the summer is called Studio 62. You work with master artists. And the whole area of Williamstown, by the way, it's known for its excellence in the arts. When it comes to art, both visual arts and theater, it's an epicenter. It's a bastion. And so, in fact, the whole Williams campus is taken over by the Williamstown Theater Festival every summer, where there's like Broadway caliber theater on the campus.
Wow.
And Williams is also has one of the absolute top college art museums in the country. Yeah. Another special program they have called WEPO, it stands for Williams Exeter Oxford Program. They have 26 students a year that go to Oxford for an entire year, and you're an actual Oxford student for a full year.
Wow.
And you live in a house, and there you're doing the same thing. 2 students and a professor, sometimes 1 student and a professor, either a 2-on-1 or a 1-on-1 ratio. So that's a program. They also have a Mystic semester-long experience, which is like an interdisciplinary program that combines environmental science as well as maritime studies. And you're on the sea. You take 3 boat trips. In fact, you go to the Atlantic, you go to the Pacific, and you go to the Gulf while you're doing environmental studies. So they have a lot of these really unique programs. Another program they have, which is great, is called JA. This stands for Junior Advisors. So one of the great things about Williams is the way they handle freshman orientation. So what happened is they cluster everybody into groups of 40 to 50 first-year students, and they create this community within these students. It's intentionally diverse. It's designed to be a microcosm of the whole school. And these JAs, these junior advisors, they work with the students like student advisors to the incoming students, helping them to transition to the school. Now, that's a volunteer opportunity. That one is not paid. Those students are generally choosing to do that in their junior year as opposed to going abroad. But they provide snacks every Sunday night, and they just help create community. And that's a big part of what makes the Williams magic work is you're out there in the Berkshires in nature, and you're with all these talented students, and you're living together in community, and you form this bond. And I'll talk a little bit later about their alumni because it's one of the most powerful alumni networks in the country. And in fact, let me just talk about it now. So Williams students will say one of the reasons you go there is the incredible alumni network. They hook each other up with jobs. They look out for each other. There's a friendship. You can go anywhere in the country and look up your Williams network, and you immediately have an incredible network. Because a certain type of bonding occurs when you're out amongst nature. And this is a very residential school. You're required to live on campus for the first 3 years. Okay. 93% of students live on campus all 4 years. And so it just, what are you going to do? You're in the middle of nature.
Yes.
Another thing that's fantastic about Williams is their Center for Career Exploration. This is their career center. And they probably do a better job with freshmen than any career center I know. So, Dave, guess what percentage of freshmen are engaged with their first years, which is their name for freshmen? And everything from things like entrepreneurship tracks in San Francisco to, interview skills, to career fairs, to seminars, workshops. Guess what percentage of their freshmen are doing that?
75%.
Ooh, good guess. 80%.
Wow.
Cool. You just don't see that level of freshmen engaged with your career placement,
Wow. Yeah.
100% of courses are taught by professors, all undergrad. for the most part, the school is all undergrad except for a few courses you can take in art history and in developmental economics. This is really all they really have going on the graduate level. Now, the most frequent grad schools that Williams grads go to for grad school are Harvard, Yale, and Columbia. And their most frequent overlap schools. So these are students that look at Williams. Where else do they look? And this is your shared applicant pool. And that group is Amherst, Middlebury, Dartmouth. And that makes sense. I mean, Middlebury and Dartmouth are two of your real powerhouse Northeast out in the middle of nature schools, right? Yeah. So it's Amherst, Middlebury, Dartmouth. Then it's Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Brown, and Columbia. So those are the 8 schools that they overlap with the most. Some of the powerhouse majors at Williams are economics, math, biology, political science, English, environmental studies. In fact, when it comes to environmental studies, the college owns a 2,600-acre forest that serves as a learning laboratory that the environmental studies majors use for a lot of their research. Sports are really big at Williams. It's a big sports school. Now, man, I told you the mascot before now. Now, what do you think? What do you think the nickname is, Dave? It's as lame as the mascot. Sorry.
Well, you're starting out with a purple cow. Okay.
It's that lame.
So it's probably like the, Maggie the Borden cow. I don't know.
It's the F's, EPHS, F's. And it's short for Ephraim Williams, who's the founder. So Ephraim Williams founded the school, so they're the Williams Fs, named after Ephraim Williams. I think that's a little lame,
Yeah, I mean, I can think of a very crude way it could be used, but the F
by rivals, by the refs.
We want to F
I'm sure they've heard the FU before, especially from rival Amherst, which is an intense athletic rival. So Williams is a powerhouse in sports. So they may have a lame nickname, but they show up and show out on the fields. So when it comes to who dominates divisions, in Division 1, it's Stanford, if you look at all the sports. And in Division 3, it's Williams. I mean, without question. So probably around 35 years ago, these schools started issuing this thing called the Director's Cup. And the Director's Cup is awarded annually to the school with the strongest overall athletic program. So there's one for Division 3, Division 2, and Division 1. So check this out, Dave. Stanford has won the Division 1 award 25 years in a row.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Because people don't realize, people think, well, I don't see Stanford winning all the times on the NCAA or in football. Yeah. But there's all those other sports, like swimming and diving and tennis and golf where they do dominate. I mean, they produce ridiculous numbers of Olympians.
Right.
But check this out. We're not talking about Stanford. We're talking about Williams. Williams has had similar success. Williams has won 21 of the last 23 Division III Director Cups.
Wow.
So they dominate. Yeah. And their strongest powerhouse sports are women's tennis, soccer, cross country, indoor track and field, amongst many, many others. And by the way, I'm drawing a blank on his name. But I can't believe I can't remember his name. He went from Division III Williams to the University of Michigan, and now he started for Miami, and he almost took the Lakers down. Mr. Three-point shooter over there. He had 10 threes in one game. Okay. Division III guy from Williams.
Wow.
See, when he goes to Michigan, I just intentionally block him out of my mind because he didn't go to Michigan State, so that's intentional there. Williams are also known for partiers, though. It is a pretty heavy drinking school. Oh. Work hard, play. There's not that much to do when you're out there in the middle of nowhere, I guess, other than study and have friends. So they did abolish fraternities and sororities a long time ago, but it has not stopped the drinking.
Wow, that's surprising.
Well, you find that very common with more remote schools. It's very common. I don't care how academic they are. They have a work hard, play hard mindset.
Yeah.
Rabid alumni base. I already mentioned that, how good the networking is. It's a lot like Dartmouth. Dartmouth's a pretty heavy drinking school. And Dartmouth's got an amazing alumni network. It's incredible. Top employers for Williams: Amazon, ESPN, Goldman Sachs, Metropolitan Museum of the Art, and the National Institute of Health. So many people I know that have gone to Williams have ended up in consulting and gone into the Wall Street route. It just maybe my sample size isn't big enough, but that so many people I've worked with have gone to Williams. That's what they've done. Now, it's my birthday today, so I got a birthday wishes from one of my former Williams students who reached out to me today, and he's in his last year of med school, so I guess not everybody goes consulting. Now, one of the traditions they have that the students love is called Mountain Day. So it's one day in October, on a Friday usually, when the president goes out and makes an announcement first thing in the morning and says, the weather's so beautiful, classes are canceled. And they have all these plans, but they're behind the scenes, like mountain biking, rock climbing, cider, a cappella groups, and everybody just loves it. That's one of the big traditions. When it comes to financial aid, I mean, I said this school's got resources on top of resources. I mean, it is unbelievable, the financial aid program they have, the need-based financial aid. Now, anytime a school's that hard to get into, you're going to have a lot of families with resources that are going to be the ones that are going to rise to the top. So 50% of their kids are full pay. They don't pay a penny. But Dave, 17% of students pay nothing.
Wow.
Other than the student work component that they have over the summer of the school year, because their income is just too low to pay anything. And they want to have that type of diversity on campus.
Yeah.
They're the only school in the country that covers all the costs for students on financial aid. All textbooks are covered. All study away, they call it study away, not just study abroad, because some of their programs are domestic. All study away expenses are covered. Health insurance is covered. And have to put something in storage over the summer? No problem. We'll cover the cost for that. So they cover all of those costs, which are things most schools just don't have the money to do. I mean, their endowment is so high, their endowment per student. And remember, a lot of times when you look at schools like the Harvards and the Emorys, you know, that have really John Hopkins, that have really big endowments. Yep. A lot of times a lot of that endowment money is allocated toward medical schools. Yeah. And that money's not necessarily just freed up for financial aid. But when you see the endowments of a Williams or a Pomona or a Swarthmore or an Amherst, there's no medical school that has to fund. And so they can just pour it right into having faculty chairs or a lot of financial aid. I'll take a break, Dave. I'm almost done. See if you have any comments, and then I'll come back with some stats. Any thoughts?
Well, I'm pondering an academic institution of the highest order that at its best comes up with a purple cow and an FU slogan. So
hey, be quiet. They won 21 of the last 23 Directors' Cups.
And 23
I think they might be the ones. They might be the ones throwing the epithets around.
Absolutely. So it must be something in the air in northern Massachusetts. That's called high-powered eclecticism. But no, on a serious note. Outstanding college in every way. I've been to Williams in a couple days. In fact, I was waiting for you to mention. Doesn't Williams have this beautiful amphitheater? It's sort of like where they give outdoor lectures. It's in the woods.
Yeah, know? and they have striking views of the Berkshire Mountains. If you're a mountain person like me, yeah. I mean, they really are against a scenic backdrop. Yeah, you know, you just have to be somebody that doesn't, you know. You can't be someone who needs to have all your international cuisine and all your restaurants, and you need your sirens and grab your Uber and go around town, because they are very, very out in the middle of the boonies.
Yeah.
But that's part of what creates the bonding. It is beautiful there, I will admit, even that I'm a weather weenie. And for me, it would be beautiful like September and October. And then April and May. Those would be the months that would be good for me. The other months would be freezing. But it's a great school. So you're tough. You can handle it.
Yes.
So I'm going to read to you a little bit. I haven't done this before. Instead of giving you all the stats singly like I normally do, I'm going to read to you what Williams released for their class of 2023, which came out about a year ago. Things were a little different this year with the COVID year. They actually admitted a few more students, like a lot of schools did. But this release came out in May of 2019. And here's what it says. Williams has extended offers of admission to 1,205 applicants for the class of 2023. And they've averaged right about 1,197 for almost a decade now. So they're pretty consistently around that 1,200 in terms of how many admission offers they go out with, which is not a lot. No. You think about it, there's 43,000 high schools. Yeah. Okay. And then you've got all your international students. And from an applicant pool of 9,715, so 13% acceptance rate. It says the admitted students represent 893 high schools. Their academic profile was exceptional. 92% were in the top 10% of their class. Average scores on the SAT, evidence-based reading and writing, 733. Math, 749. Average super score on the ACT, 33. Says the students were remarkable in terms of interest, academic and co-curricular, and their bios are very varied. They represent talented visual and performing artists, athletes, student government representatives, entrepreneurs, volunteers, community leaders, and activists. Of the admitted students, 134 are international, representing 52 countries. Among American students, 58% identify as students of color. 37% identify as white, and 5% opted not to identify. 20% are first generation. 7% are children of alumni. 515 men, 597 women. 3 identify as trans or transgender. 4 is non-binary. 6 another identity. 80 did not respond to that question. 14% are from Massachusetts. Among students from the U.S., 29% from the Mid-Atlantic, 22% from the West, 17% from the Northeast, 14% from the South, 10% from the Midwest, and 7% from the Southwest. 4 from Puerto Rico, 14 living overseas. Amongst the admitted class of 2023, 30% are affiliated with community-based organizations. Dave, I need to go into depth to people about Questbridge at some point to explain that.
Okay.
But they accepted 254 students of the 1,200 from Questbridge.
Wow, that's huge. That's almost a quarter of their class.
It's a lot. I mean, it's a good one. More than a fifth.
Yeah,
more than a fifth. So about 22%. Now that doesn't mean they all came, but that's who they admitted.
Wow.
They've been a Questbridge partner for 16 years. For now, I'll just tell you, Questbridge is the nation's largest organization at identifying high-achieving, low-income students of all races. It's majority white and Asian, but a decent number of Latino and Black students. So it's a mixture when it comes to race and ethnicity, but it is high-achieving, low-income. Now, first-year students returning, retention rate 97%, graduation rate, 4-year graduation rate 88.2%. And so you're going to get a really, really high graduation rate when you're handpicking the top kids. And money's a non-issue. It's just the way it is. So there's Williams College. Thank you, Jillian from California. You asked for it.
Great college.
You got it. It's a school that can compete with any school, especially if you really want to get to know your professors. You love living in community, and you're outdoorsy. Because it's innovative. It attracts highly motivated kids, but they do a great job at keeping that cooperative, collaborative component in there. And I think when you're living in the middle of nowhere, I've really come to the conclusion that there's because you're not distracted by all the things that cities have to offer, you just go so deep in your relationships that it ends up making that alumni bond so strong. And a lot of what the alumni do is they reach out to graduates of the school and they hire them to come work in their corporations.
Yep. And it ascends the pantheon of eclectic mascots with its effing purple cow.
You had to end on that.
That's right.
I'm always getting on Dave for his foul mouth, so he found a way to get in and be politically correct.
Hey, man, yeah, I'm just going by the Williams book.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. Your College Bound Kid is produced by Dave Vasaya of podcastengineers.com. If you find this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that can really use this information. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Our image editor is Tauha Khan. Webmaster is Stalianos Dimitru, and marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. And if you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340. And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like to ask us, and we'll include them on the show, you can just email us at questions with an S at yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions. So send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.